This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss, co-host of PBS's MotorWeek. He'll take your calls and comments now at 844-885-4677 or email him at radio@goss-garage.com. And now, Pat Goss.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Goss's Garage. I'm Pat Goss. Now, coming up in just a minute, after our tip of the week, we're going to be joined by our friend Lyndon Abel. We're going to be talking about Harley Davidson and things related to motorcycles. But before that, many of you will be traveling for the holidays, which means you'll get your cars checked before hitting the road. But watch out for an old school scam that's coming back. It works like this. You take your car in for those new tires the car has been needing for a while now, and you're told you need an alignment. They bring your car into the shop, raise it on a lift, remove the tires, now that's so you can't leave, and then begin their scam. They tell you your tires wore out due to a bad alignment, so you okay the alignment. After all, the last set of tires didn't last nearly as long as they should have, plus they'll give you a great package price for the alignment with your new tires. Damn, to find an honest shop? Sure feels good. Next, they start checking the suspension and steering parts for the alignment, which is 100% legitimate, but if they're dishonest, it's where the scam begins. They tell you your car needs new ball joints, tie rod ends, control arm bushings, or any of a dozen other things under the car that you don't know and wouldn't know if one of them hit you right in the face. Anyway, they explain that the car could be dangerous and needs to be fixed. Then they build your trust by giving you a price for the new parts and labor and tell you that because you're spending a lot of money, well, they'll give you a discount. And that, of course, is to help you out. Wow, now you're really impressed and tell them to go ahead with the work. They install the new parts, then your car goes to the alignment machine where the tech scratches a few alignment-related parts with pliers and squirts some oil on other alignment parts, and we folks have a perfect fake alignment. 10 minutes work, $59. Think about that. 10 minutes per alignment would mean 6 per hour at $59 each, or $354 per hour. But you say, nah, never happened to me. Couldn't be, because my car always feels different when I get it back. Oh, really? Even if they did a fake alignment, the car will feel much different with new tires or rotated tires. So they fooled you there. Still hasn't happened to me. Nope, not my car, because if they didn't really align it, my new tires would wear out too soon, just like the last set. Oops, come to think of it, they actually did wear out early again. Now, when you go back to complain, they tell you to blame it on the lousy potholes, not their alignment. But even though they maintain it isn't their fault, they'll do you a favor for being a loyal customer and give you new tires at cost. Now, you're blown away at this point. These folks really are honest. The hell they are. They cheated you on your alignment and stole a bunch of your money. Next, they say they'll do another alignment free of charge, but when they get your car on the alignment machine, guess what? Now it supposedly needs more front-end parts. So you have another big bill. After they install the front-end parts, they do another fake alignment, and the whole thing starts over again. Bottom line, they stole your money. You've been sold many hundreds of dollars of work you may not have needed. You've had multiple fake alignments, yet at the same time, they made you smile. Pretty clever. Don't get me wrong, most shops are 100% honest. But like all businesses, there are a few bad ones who might try to scam you. So use a little common sense, folks. All right. That said, Lyndon Abel,
Good morning, Pat.
How you doing?
Doing great.
Good. Good to see you again.
Nice to
Hey,
be here.
you got new digs.
I do. I'm at All American Harley Davidson down in Hughesville, Maryland.
Huggiesville.
Yes. It's a pretty nice riding down there.
Yeah, it is. That's nice country down there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a nice ride down the Pax River. Beautiful roads. And I've ridden down there before, of course, but nice ride to work sometimes.
Yeah. All right. So tell me a little bit about them.
Well, the dealership has been there since '06. New owners a couple of years ago, and I got to talking to them earlier this year about a variety of different things, and it led to them wanting to bring me on board, and it seemed like a pretty good fit. So here I am, and it's a good store. Obviously, I think that there's areas where we can improve and grow, and I'll be working on that. But a lot of good folks there. Impressed with the service manager, and actually a couple of the technicians. One of the technicians is a guy that I've known for many years, and another one I've known for almost 22 years. He started in the business about the same time that I did, and we ended up going in somewhat different directions, but really a good guy.
Well, that's your forte. You take these businesses, good businesses, but make them better businesses.
That's definitely the goal. Never made one worse so far.
Well, that's good to hear. All right, so one store?
So far.
So far. All right. We'll end that right there. All right, now you have some new product, too.
Yeah, Harley Davidson literally just released a new model called the Sport Glide. I think there's a picture of it.
Yeah, we have one right behind you there.
And it's a little bit of a, so they've done this twice before in similar ways. They had an FXR convertible, and everybody always thought that was funny to have a convertible motorcycle. And then they had a Dyna convertible, and this is the Sport Glide. So they all work in a similar fashion, which is that there was a detachable windshield or fairing and then detachable saddlebags. So the picture behind us is the Sport Glide with the fairing and the bags removed, and they come off in 30, 40 seconds. The fairing comes off with a click of a lever, and the bags come off. You open them up and rotate a knob and pull them right off. So it's a really nicely designed setup, and the bike looks like a sort of badass Harley cruiser with the bags and the fairing off, and then obviously with a couple of clicks you've got practical storage and some protection. The windshield that comes on the fairing is pretty abbreviated. But there is a taller windshield. I have yet to ride it, but it is based on the new Milwaukee 8 motor. Well, not based on, it's wrapped into that chassis, right? The new Softail chassis, which is lighter and substantially stiffer than the previous Softail chassis. The Milwaukee 8 motor, which is, again, producing a lot more power, and it runs cooler and actually more fuel efficient, which doesn't make any sense, right?
This is a 107, right?
107, yeah. But we have the ways to pump it up to a 114 with extra compression and still keep it under warranty, which is sort of amazing.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, really neat. And then on the Sport Glide, it's got an inverted front end. So, pretty high-end suspension, external preload adjustment for the rear suspension, and much more powerful motor. So, and they put a lot of thought into, as they did throughout the entire new Softail line, to lean angles, and not just measured the way you're supposed to measure them. Obviously, they're required to measure them a specific way, but that's with the suspension 75% compressed front and rear, which is really never a situation you're going to be in when you're heeled over. You're usually either less compressed on both, or you're one or the other, right? Accelerating, you're compressing the rear. pretty easy to drag the
Oh yeah.
floorboards on
Been
your
there,
Heritage,
done that
right?
a few times.
So these give you a lot more lean angle, and of course with more power and a more rigid suspension, you got a lot more confidence in pushing into the turns. So while I haven't ridden this model yet, because we just got one, I have ridden several models in the Softail lineup, and really an impressive ride. Now, if you're looking for a fun bike with that classic Harley style, that's your go-to.
Well, you know, one thing I like about it is once you strip it down, you don't have all this ugly crap all over it for support for the bags and stuff like that.
Right, big studs hanging out. There was a nice detachable kit for Heritages that left a pretty, attractive docking hardware behind. And, years ago I'd have customers that go, oh yeah, I just take the bags off, I don't need all that. So if they take them off, there's, 2.5 inches of all thread studs sticking out of the side of your
Right. Well, that's like my electric light. If I take the bags off, I've got all this ugly, I mean really ugly ass hardware behind them.
Yeah, and the other thing is there was always a demand. So over the years, I mean, it's funny that you brought that up, but over the years I had a lot of customers who would say, they would have Road King was probably where it was most desirable. I really want a way to take my bags off and have it look good. And the problem is that bike was really designed to look great with bags.
Mm-hmm.
And once you take the bags off, it changes the whole proportion of the bike. And so, people think, I'm going to get a Road King, it's got a detachable windshield, I'll make the bags, take the bags off and, put something back there that will clean that up, or I'll chrome all that stuff. But when you step back, you realize that it just doesn't look right.
Yeah.
The whole proportion of the bike is just doesn't work with the bags off of it. So a friend of mine was trying to design a bag eliminator that would just be sort of an extended side cover that would come back and fill in the proportion. But then you sort of have the same look, you just don't have any place to put your sandwich.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, something like this is really great because it looks correct with the bags on and it looks correct with the bags off. And I, of course, have an old FXR convertible. I actually have two because, I have a pretty serious problem, as you know.
No, not Lyndon.
I suffer from a more healthy addiction than some, but it's still an addiction. Anyway, that was a great bike, and I run that thing without bags 99% of the time, but a couple of years ago I had a business meeting down Durham, North Carolina, and I thought, I'm just going to take this bike. And I plugged the saddlebags into the thing and loaded them up, and had another bag on the passenger seat, and I was carrying almost as much gear as I would have fit into my Road Glide on this very sporty bike. And then of course I took the 12-hour route to Durham, but it was a fun day.
I can imagine. Hey folks, we need to take a break. If you have a question for Lyndon from All American Harley Davidson, or for me, give us a call. The number is 844-885-4677. When we come back, we'll have more with Lyndon, and we're going to talk to Brian from Idaho. A question about misinformation. All right, we'll see what that's about in just a minute, right here on Goss's Garage.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Never drive with a bad attitude. I know that's hard with so many stupid, distracted, aggressive, and just plain rude drivers on the road. Thing to do. I drive a lot, and I used to see reckless, rude, or aggressive drivers. Maybe day it seems like every other driver is doing something stupid. When it was sporadic, it wasn't so hard to deal with, but now it seems like there's always an idiot 3 feet from my rear bumper or weaving into my lane or cutting me off. Distracted? Probably. Dangerous? Absolutely. But there's nothing to do except drive defensively and not aggravate other drivers. Much as I'd like to, I don't middle finger the offending driver, and definitely don't hit my brakes to scare a tailgater. Initially, these situations may be simple mistakes, but an aggressive response to a mistake can escalate it into a personal confrontation, which can easily turn into road rage. Unfortunately, you have no idea which one of these idiots will try to hurt you with their car, a weapon, or their fists. Also, never make direct eye contact with the offending driver. If you're the offender, be courteous and get out of the way. Whether it's a mistake or intentional aggression, remember, back down, yield, let it go. It takes brains to overcome anger. Use your brain. Be smart. I get lots of air filter questions, and one of the most common deals with why air filters need to be replaced so often. Well, actually, they usually don't, yet many drivers wind up buying a new air filter at every oil change, which is utterly ridiculous. Drivers say techs tell them if they don't buy a new air filter, they'll waste a lot of gas. Maybe that statement comes from ignorance or maybe dishonesty, but either way, you lose. Decades ago, dirty air filters did waste gas, but today, not so much. Cars now use a sensor to measure the air coming through the air filter, and computers to mix exactly the right amount of gas to match that air. So even though a dirty air filter reduces airflow into the engine, it doesn't affect gas mileage because the computer is always precisely matching fuel to the incoming air. In other words, a dirty filter means less air, and less air means less gas, so there's never an imbalance between air and fuel. Certainly when a filter gets really, really dirty, it can cause performance problems, but even then it may not affect gas mileage. So how long do air filters last? Unless you drive in really dusty conditions, air filters usually last 30 to 60,000 miles. Overselling of air filters is an enormous problem, and the best way not to be taken is to learn how to check your own air filter and check it twice a year.
Now, back to Goss's Garage with your host, Pat Goss.
For those of you enjoying Goss's Garage on TuneIn.com, please note our new showtime every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. All right, Lyndon Abel from All American Harley Davidson is here with us. And let's go to the phones and talk to Brian in Idaho. Brian, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Yeah, good morning, Pat. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I had a question about, I was doing some research last week on the internet for some projects I'm waiting to do on this Fairlane I've been working on. And it kind of occurred to me, I mean, the amount of misinformation that is on the internet. You know, luckily, being an ex-technician, I have enough knowledge that I can kind of weed out, you know, what's unreasonable and find the information I need. My question for you as a business owner, I got curious about this. In your automotive business, have you found in the last 20 or 25 years where you've got car owners that are doing their due diligence, trying to inform themselves by doing, like, say, research on the internet about a problem they're having, and then bringing the car to you, and has it helped customer relations? Has it hurt it? Where maybe somebody got information on the net and say, no, Pat, or your shop, you're wrong, that's not it. I read it on the internet, it must be true. Has it had any effect like that at all in your business?
Yes, it has, as a matter of fact. And, of course, a lot of what they come in with is absolutely misinformation. There's so much bogus stuff on the internet, it defies imagination. I can't say that it has hurt or helped customer relations. To some extent, the ones that are right, of course, that saves them some money and so on, because they come in and want us to do X, and we do X, and it solves the problem, and that's fine. Then you get the ones that come in and they're talking about parts that don't even exist and things like that, and then you have to explain to them. And sometimes you lose money because you have to sit down and give them an education with pictures and so on, and pull up all data or something like that and show them what how things work and so on. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah, just a new, a blessing mixed with problems and vice versa, I suppose.
Well, one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that there are some people on the internet. We have learned to live with hackers and all of that stuff. We get spam all the time, just all kinds of craziness going on. People trying to infect our computers with viruses and so on. Well, along with that, when it comes to automobiles, there are actually groups of people who deliberately try to mislead people. They set themselves up as if they're experts and so on, and they answer questions with ridiculous answers. And they have contests, and the winner of the contest is the one who destroys somebody's engine or transmission. So
yeah, I noticed that too. There are some well-intentioned people out there that are just simply misinformed themselves.
Right. And
there's those people that you were talking about. So yeah, I got curious about that when I was doing that last week. So
yeah, it's a very good point. In order to know if you're getting good information, you almost have to know it to begin with.
Yeah, or at least mostly.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to have a pretty good idea how Pat, things work.
Yeah, you betcha.
All righty.
All right, Pat. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate your input. It's always good to hear from you. And who do we have here? I can't see my computer. C-Bar?
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir. You're calling us from India?
Sir, I'm calling from India.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Sir, I want to understand how gear shift happens in a transaxle. That is, two cables are actually changing 5 forward gears and 1 reverse gear. I'm unable to understand how it happens.
Run that by me again.
I want to understand how gear shifting happens using 2 cables. The 6 gears are changed in a car, in a transmission.
Oh.
5 forward gears and 1 reverse gear.
Okay, you're talking about a manual transmission. It's cable operated, either has 1 cable or 2 cables to do multiple things. The way it works is actually pretty simple. Not only do the cables move back and forth, but when you move the lever from one side to the other, it rocks the cable from side to side and moves a second lever. So it's just that you can move these cables in more than one or more than 2 directions. You can go backwards and forwards, or you can go from side to side as you move the shift lever. I don't know if that helps or hurts or.
I want to actually practically see how it happens. I have searched the internet. I'm not unable to get any clear video or explanation on this.
No, I don't know of any. I mean, it's pretty basic. The ideal thing is just to remove the air filter on the car, have somebody sit in it and look at the cables and move it back and forth, move it from side to side, and you'll see what happens with the various pieces of linkage.
I can see the cable moving, but I want to see what actually happens inside the transaction.
Inside the transmission?
Yeah.
I don't know that. I mean, you've got shift forks and so on that the cables are moving around, and they're moving one lever to move something back and forth, and then they're moving another lever to move it from one side of the transmission to the other. I don't really know how to explain it other than you might be able to find some kind of a cutaway or something on the internet that would show how this works.
For a long time, I'm unable to find even a single explanation which explains it clearly.
You're breaking up on that. I didn't hear all of that. Okay, looks like we've lost our connection there. Kind of a hard concept.
I mean, I am super familiar with how a Harley-Davidson transmission works.
Oh, really?
But I'm, you know, if you said, does the car manual transmission work the same way? I'd say, I don't know. I mean, I've had manual transmissions my entire life, but I've never taken one apart. Harley transmissions, taking a whole bunch of them apart. I know exactly how they work.
All of this stuff works pretty much on the same principle.
Well, I mean, in the case of a Harley-Davidson transmission, and motorcycle transmissions in general, because they're sequential, which I find to be incredibly logical, right? So you just go boom, and it goes to the next gear, boom, it goes to the next gear, or up to the next gear, up to the next gear. You've got a shift drum with a follower that is taking a circuitous path, and the follower is attached to a shift fork. And so by moving that shift drum, it pushes the shift fork this way or pulls it that way, and that shift fork is attached to, in the case of Harley's 5-speeds, essentially a gear, and it, you know, if it's a freewheeling gear, it locks into a place that locks it into the rotating shaft, which makes that the powered gear. In the case of the 6-speeds, they use dog rings, and those, you know, those dogs are essentially square blocks that are engage the gear in order to attach it to the shaft and have it spin with the shaft instead of freewheeling. And, you know, to me, that whole concept is really straightforward, but I don't really know how it works in a car. I assume the whole thing's bigger.
Yeah, it's bigger, and they look toward things to where a Harley or most motorcycles, you shift them, you get a clunk and so on. Not acceptable in a car, so lots of bits of plastic and things like that to dampen the sounds and so on, and lots of synchronizers and various things to get everything moving at the same speed, so it's just buttery smooth. And
I mean, if you have a well aligned, I mean, it gets more sophisticated, but if you have those dogs cut a certain way, they engage much more easily and much more smoothly. But, you know, as you know, it comes down to the matching the RPMs. And if you just pull in the clutch and don't do anything with the throttle and slam it into the next gear, you know, for the most part, it'll work. But if I one time had a clutch cable go out, and I was a long way from home, and I thought, I can do this. So it was just, if I wanted to shift, I took the power off of it, but kept it, you know, right in cruising range, and then slipped it out. And while if I'm downshifting, lowering the throttle. If I'm upshifting, lowering the throttle, and if I'm downshifting, raising the throttle, slip it into the next gear. In a car, because you've got neutral in between each gear, it's actually really easy to do. On a motorcycle, it's a little more challenging. But I can drive a manual shift transmission without using a clutch, as long as you're gentle and you're careful with the throttle.
Yeah, I drove a Corvette with a manual transmission with a busted clutch. The master cylinder had failed on it. Drove it from way up in northern Pennsylvania all the way down here to Maryland.
Just hoping you don't hit too many stoplights.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little challenging here and there.
That's the tough part.
Right. But, you know, yeah, you can shift them.
Yeah, it's actually kind of fun. I mean, you know, there's a sense of accomplishment when you've feathered that thing just right and it slides into gear with no metal-to-metal sounds of gnashing.
Yeah, because sometimes, I mean, it is, if you get everything just right, it is so smooth and silent that you would never know.
You get pretty proud of yourself when you do that shift, right?
But I have to tell you, I didn't always hit it just right, and then sounds like a jackhammer.
Yeah, I learned to drive on an old Volkswagen, which probably didn't have synchro mesh or whatever, and even though there was almost no power to that thing, so it was really pretty easy to shift. I'm sure that made my dad crazy when he was trying to show me how to work this thing. And then we had a farm truck, which had a lot more power, and you know, that was pretty hard not to go getting it into gear. But you know, eventually I grew up, thank goodness.
All right, we need to take another break. More with Lyndon Abel from All American Harley Davidson coming up right here on Goss's Garage.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Space Saver spare tires sure do look silly, but if you use them properly, they will get you home safely. Now, a common problem with them is low air pressure. Spares are buried in the trunk and no one ever seems to check their pressure. Plus, they typically require much higher pressure than your regular tires. Also, Space Saver spares have limits on how far and how fast you can drive on them. Bottom line, always read and follow the caution warnings on their labels and sidewalls. Oh yeah, don't be one of those poor schmucks with a flat tire and a flat spare. Check your spare once a month. While checking the spare, look at the jack handle, and the lug wrench to be sure everything is there and in working order. The best spare tire in the world is useless without the tools to put it on the car. Some cars may even require special lug nuts to mount the spare. If those special lug nuts are missing, you will have no safe way to use your spare. Don't fall victim to "it looks good, therefore it must be good." Like when thump bump you're tapped by another car at a traffic light or in a parking lot. You get out and look, and being a good person, yeah, right. You just don't want the hassle of calling the cops and your insurance company. Plus, you don't even see a scratch, so you let it go. That could be a minor to deadly mistake. What you see is purely cosmetic, but hidden behind the cosmetics are safety systems. Those hidden parts absorb and dissipate energy, and they may have been damaged in that tiny bump. The problem is that unless you have energy absorbers and crumple zones checked, they may not protect you if your car is hit again in the same spot. Most safety parts are one-time use, and that first minor bump may have used up a portion of their effectiveness. Then, in an actual accident, they're only partially effective. For instance, the energy absorber may transmit more of the crash energy into the car and the people in the car. That could mean the difference between no or minor injuries or something worse, especially for young or elderly passengers. Even in bumps that seem like a total non-issue, take a minute to exchange information, then have the safety parts behind the bumper checked. It might save a life.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. And now, Pat Goss.
For those enjoying Goss's Garage on TuneIn.com, please note our new showtime every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. Lyndon Abel from All American Harley Davidson is here in the studio. And let's talk to Ron with the 2015 Explorer. Ron, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Thank you, Pat. Yes, my question is, I had that 2015, as you know. I've got a lot of carbon buildup on the exhaust tips. I have quite a bit of reading on it. And I know in 2018, I heard rumors that Ford may do some fuel injection on the backside of the intake valves to stop the carbon buildup, as you know, on a lot of these direct injection engines. Have you heard anything about that, or any ideas so I might be able to cut that carbon buildup in 2015?
What we do here in the shop, number one, part of that is caused by crankcase emissions. So a catch can usually cuts it by probably 90%. So in many cases with a catch can, you won't have enough carbon buildup that it'll pose any kind of a problem at all in less than 100 to 120,000 miles. The other thing that we do is an induction system cleaning, which, contrary to what everybody says, where you got to take the engine apart and disassemble everything and manually clean everything, a good, high-quality induction system cleaning that's injected through the throttle body will go over the backs of the valves, will clean it. Now, that presumes that you do it on a regular basis so that the buildup doesn't get to be too bad.
Okay, all right. Well, it's a little comforting for me as you're talking about no real issue, at least 100,000 or so.
Yeah, like I say, the catch cans, what causes the majority of this is that the crankcase breather system, the PCV, plugs into the intake, usually right at the throttle body. So any fumes that have oil in them or anything from the crankcase, they are passed through the intake over the backs of the valves. Valves are hot, so the oil forms these deposits because of the hot valves. So if you do away with that oil, and you'd be shocked at how much oil you'll collect in a catch can, usually you'll have to empty it once or twice, depending on your oil change intervals between oil changes. And so you're looking at, in some cases, a pint or a quart that would otherwise be sent right over the backs of the valves. So you're doing away with a huge amount of, the contamination that causes this.
Okay, all right, good. That's a good explanation. I've never had anybody explain that to me previously. So thank you so much.
Okay. All right, yeah,
must be a bigger problem with direct injection, because if you have a conventional throttle body, then the gasoline is helping to wash that stuff.
Yeah, well, conventional injection, the injector's in the intake manifold, sprays it right across the back of the valve, which tends to help clean it.
Yeah, disperse that oil and keep it from building up. And obviously it burns in there, but more of it's likely to end up getting burned and sent through the exhaust port.
Right. Where with the direct injection,
yeah, totally makes sense. Greater likelihood of, because I was thinking, a fuel system cleaner might help that, and then I said, wait a second, no, it's not.
No, because
downstream.
Yeah, whoops, we missed it. It's up there.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Direct injection isn't something we have to worry about in my shop yet, but
yeah, but it'll probably,
when fuel pumps get smaller, more efficient, if you can hide them in a gas tank, then we'll probably see it too.
Yeah, and that's one of the big issues with direct injection. Not only is there an issue with the contamination on the valves, but people who don't change the oil, they don't realize you've got this typically $1,200 to $100 to $2,000 high pressure pump that's driven off of one of the camshafts on the engine.
Okay.
Lubricated
So
by the
driven.
crankcase
Okay.
oil.
Oh.
And if you don't change oil regularly or use the right type of oil, then what happens is you'll have the same problem you used to have with old flat tappet engines and so on, with where you didn't use zinc and it would eat the cam
Right.
and the lifter and so on. Well, it just eats up the bottom of the
So they're all
injector.
mechanically driven. Do you think
Yeah.
you'll see electronic pumps that can handle that?
I don't know. You see, you're looking.
So we're not going to see direct injection until we can drive them electronically.
Right. I don't know. These systems are running 10 to 30,000 psi.
Right.
So,
I mean, Tesla's making a 800 horsepower motor, right?
all right. All right.
Listen, I'm delving into areas where I don't belong. Let's go back to motorcycles.
Wintertime.
Wintertime, yeah.
You don't ride in the winter.
Of course I do.
So do I.
So if you're going to ride in the winter, there are some things that you should pay attention to. I'm always surprised there's the number of people that I talk to who say, well, I'm never going to ride in the winter. And I go, why not? And they say, it's too cold. And I, try to win them over to this concept. It's not that it's too cold, it's that you're too cold. So ergo, if you weren't cold, you'd enjoy riding in the wintertime, right?
Right.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so let's take a couple strategies and keep you from being uncomfortable, and then you can enjoy riding in the wintertime. So obviously, it's not difficult. When I started riding, I was young and stupid and enthusiastic. Enthusiasm probably made up for some of the lack of warmth. But, this isn't that complicated, right? If you wear some gear that can protect you, you can stay comfortable. And there's basically two ways to do that. One is to insulate, right? Layers. Your body's putting out heat. You just need to retain the maximum amount of it. So insulate or generate. Use heated gear to create more warmth than your body can generate by itself. If you generate heat with heated gear, you need to, it's a little more complex. You either have battery-driven heated gear or, pigtail on your bike that you can plug into. But it simplifies everything. You just don't need to worry about as much stuff, because if you start getting cold, you just turn the dial up a little bit and you get warmer. If you were going to insulate, one of the things is to make sure that you protect the areas where you lose the most heat. So that's, your head, your neck, your wrists. You lose a lot of heat in those spaces. Having a bandana or a balaclava or a neck gaiter or something to protect this space on your neck where, it can make you a little uncomfortable, but you'll lose an insane amount of heat. For most people riding motorcycles, they have to wear a helmet anyway. But if you're in a place where you have free choice as to whether to wear a helmet or not, the difference between how cold you will get not wearing a helmet and wearing a helmet is night and day. And then, of course, your face, right? If you wear a full face helmet, you're going to stay substantially more comfortable than if you wear an open face helmet. So, I mean, this all seems pretty basic, right? But dressing properly for the ride. I know a lot of people are guilty of looking outside on a, we get lots of nice days, November and December, and they look outside and they go, wow, it's sunny outside, and I walk outside and I feel warm. Yeah, but it's 48 degrees, right? It feels warm because the sun's on your face. You get on the bike and go rushing through that 48-degree air, and you get to be 48 degrees pretty quick, which is cold. And if you don't prepare for the ride, you get yourself in a little bit of trouble. So making sure that you have gloves that go over your jacket, cover up the wrist, something around your neck, at least a helmet, but full face helmet will certainly keep you warmer. And just plan on the temperature Don't look outside and say, it's sunny, it feels warm right now, I'll be good. So that's a big part of it, is dressing for the ride. Another thing that I'm sure relates directly to cars is making sure that your bike is ready for the ride. You know, it needs to be dressed for the ride also. In my world, people tend to take shorter rides in the wintertime. And somebody who, for instance, has a 5-mile commute to work and commutes via motorcycle a couple of days a week isn't even getting their motor up to full operating temperature. And as you know, one of the byproducts of combustion is water. Now, a lot of people don't know that, but that's why you see sometimes water dripping out of a tailpipe, right? Because that steam has condensated, condensed, and turned back into water and is, drop it on the ground. But as things get hot enough, and probably that's more of an old car thing because catalytic converters don't allow that to happen these days. But the water still ends up in the oil system, and unless you get that oil up above water boiling temperature, it doesn't come out. And so what we see a lot of times in the spring is we go to service somebody's motorcycle, we drain the oil, and this, chocolate mousse comes out. Mm-hmm. And that always hurts me because, oil is there to lubricate, it's also there to clean, it's also there to cool, but it's also there to protect against corrosion. And when you have that kind of water mixed into the oil, it's not protecting against corrosion so much as it is promoting corrosion.
Yeah.
So if you take shorter rides, you want to be a little more diligent about servicing your motorcycle. Brake fluid is one of the more overlooked pieces of motorcycle maintenance, and you might get more water building up in the summertime, but if in an extreme situation in the wintertime, when it's well below freezing, before you start riding, you can pull your motorcycle out and it may warm up later on. But if it was cold enough, that can compromise the way your brakes are working, and that obviously would be very dangerous. You're not going to have a problem with that if you simply flush your brake fluid every 2 years. And when it's serviced, we always test it. If you're above 4% moisture content, change it no matter what. But if it's been 2 years, get rid of it.
Yeah, same with cars. Moisture, brake fluid is hygroscopic. It not only absorbs, but it attracts moisture.
Yep. But Pat, it's a sealed system. It should never be a problem.
Right, sealed.
You heard that before?
Oh, I've heard that many a time. But, oh my goodness. We need to take another break. More with Lyndon Abel from All American Harley Davidson coming up.
Operators are standing by to take your call for Pat at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
I get lots of air filter questions, and one of the most common deals with why air filters need to be replaced so often. Well, actually, they usually don't, yet many drivers wind up buying a new air filter at every oil change, which is utterly ridiculous. Drivers say techs tell them if they don't buy a new air filter, they'll waste a lot of gas. Maybe that statement comes from ignorance or maybe dishonesty, but either way, you lose. Decades ago, dirty air filters did waste gas, but today, not so much. Cars now use a sensor to measure the air coming through the air filter, and computers to mix exactly the right amount of gas to match that air. So even though a dirty air filter reduces airflow into the engine, it doesn't affect gas mileage because the computer is always precisely matching fuel to the incoming air. In other words, a dirty filter means less air, and less air means less gas, so there's never an imbalance between air and fuel. Certainly when a filter gets really, really dirty, it can cause performance problems, but even then it may not affect gas mileage. So how long do air filters last? Unless you drive in really dusty conditions, air filters usually last 60,000 miles. Overselling of air filters is an enormous problem, and the best way not to be taken is to learn how to check your own air filter and check it twice a year.
Now, back to Goss's Garage with your host, Pat Goss.
Please, folks, subscribe to Goss's Garage on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, and for more car tips, tricks, and money-saving ideas, visit goss-garage.com. All right, now let's go to Hawaii and talk to Ian with the Saturn Vue.
Yeah, hi, my name is Ian Colt, and my issue is I have a GM vehicle, Saturn Vue, and I had to bypass the heater core because it was leaking. I live in Hawaii, so I don't need heat. And ever since then, when I drive it, it keeps going. I keep getting the warning that the engine's hot, and it turns off the AC won't work. But everything is working. I can't figure out, the thermostat's good, coolant temperature sensor is good, circulation is good. I can't figure out why it keeps doing this, and it's really annoying because I can't get any AC, So anyway, thanks for taking my call. Bye.
All right. Now, Ian, what you need to do, and I don't know if you've done this or not, but you need to bleed the cooling system, and you need to bleed it properly. You see, most all late model cars have some special bleeding procedure that requires any of a number of different things. One of the things that frequently happens is because of the positioning of the heater core and the hoses and all of the fittings at the back of the engine on SUVs and minivans and so on, is that the back part of the cooling system is higher than the radiator cap. So if you fill it in the radiator, there's no way for the air to get out of the system. So what you have to do is you have to jack up, and sometimes we almost stand them on end. You have to jack up the front of the vehicle to get the radiator cap to the highest point in the system. That way the air will migrate up and out through the cap. Other ways to do it, of course, there will be bleeder valves and various things like that. You have to look for the bleeder valves, and in many cases you'll need a service manual because the bleeder valves will have to be opened in a certain sequence and various things. It's not just filling it with coolant anymore. Those days are long gone. So you don't have that problem.
Like, actually we do on the twin-cool models. You have to hook it up to digital tech and, follow the process. Or, bleeding brakes. That used to be just, honey,
Yeah.
could you get in there and stomp on the brake pedal when I tell you to, and you crack the bleeder, and when bubbles stop coming through the tube, you're good to go.
Yeah.
But now, hook it up to digital tech. I mean, you can bleed it, but you don't, you can flush it without doing that, but you're not really flushing it. There's a huge part of the system where you still got all that, cruddy brake fluid in there.
Yeah, we find that a lot on cars because people will do their own bleeding, and the most expensive part of the brake system is the ABS controller.
Sure, right.
And you aren't touching it.
Right.
Because you have to use the some kind
But
of
it's a
scan
sealed
tool.
system, Pat.
Oh yes, it's a sealed system, except it isn't sealed.
Right. I mean, it's kind of sealed.
Yeah, kind of sealed, sort of, kind of, but it's not like people think.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. Listen, the modern stuff on these new motorcycles and new cars is great, but it comes with complexity. On the one hand, I sort of yearn for the simplicity of, being able to bleed a brake system by myself, with my two hands. On the other hand, anti-lock brakes are awesome. And, on the one hand, I complain about the modern electronics. On the other hand, being able to have a GPS screen and inside my fairing, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, and there's
Life's filled with compromise, right?
Right.
Pat?
No more failed points or condensers.
Yeah, right.
All that stuff.
You curse the electronic ignition system when it fails, but it doesn't really fail very often.
Yeah. I mean, we rarely see that in cars anymore.
I mean, when they started in Harleys, it was probably 79 or 80, and so, you'd see some of those failures, up through the late 80s, and then later on, as the motors got hotter, there were some issues with the cam sensors, the cam timing sensor, which is what the ignition system was driven on in those days, and those things would get hot and sort of sticky, and they'd fail. But they're well past that now. We're using crank position sensors, and I mean, you might see 2, 3 fail a year if you're doing a lot of work.
Yeah.
And that's thousands of bikes.
Right.
Thousands.
And that's the same thing here in the shop. We just don't see the number of failures on these electronic parts. And when we do, typically it can be traced back to the driver who hasn't maintained the battery, and you got some kind of a voltage spike because you had these cruddy battery cables and things like that.
That's a great point. I mean, it used to be with older cars or older Harleys, you could drive it on a dead battery. You were overworking the charging system a little bit. But today, if your battery's not in good shape, all sorts of fluky things start happening.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure it's much worse in cars. But, when you see kind of quirky stuff, instead of trying to get too deep into that, you need to stop and say, how old's this battery? And a lot of times you find out it's the original battery and it's a 4 to 7-year-old motorcycle, and you go, yeah, let's start with that. Because you need it anyway, and the problems will solve themselves in many cases. But yeah, you end up tearing up the merchandise because you're trying to wring a couple extra dollars worth out of your battery.
Yeah, we have a rule here in the shop, and that is that any performance, any check engine light, or any electrical problem, step number 1 is to test the battery.
We test the battery with every service, and of course Harley has a proprietary battery. Well, they didn't make it, but it's for their batteries, and it's a very sophisticated tester. At the same time, I've seen batteries that have tested acceptable, like they're not perfect, but they test good. And I'm still convinced it's the problem. We put it in a new battery, and it was the problem.
Yeah, there's still this thing about understanding symptoms and that gut feeling that you get on some of these situations.
Yeah.
And right, it passes every test, but we know it isn't working.
I've been doing this for a while. That's the problem. I'm sure of it. And a lot of times you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to verify that, obviously, not jump to assumptions. And I think people can be guilty of that too. You hear a symptom that is, in the old days, you'd have a sneezing Harley Davidson, and people say, oh, you need to rejet the carburetor. And I was like, I mean, maybe, but let's make sure we check for an intake leak also. Like, don't tell them to rejet their carburetor before you've made sure that that's the problem. Mm-hmm. So, there's trust your instincts, but verify. It's a Reagan principle, right?
One of the things that gets me, and I had one this week, car has been to 4 or 5 different shops, been tested, retested, and all such. Guy calls me, says, my car's been everywhere, everything on it is perfect, yet it stalls. I said, well, let me tell you something.
I'm willing to bet that your first statement is wrong.
Right, exactly. It can't be perfect and still have a problem.
Right.
Somebody is overlooking something.
Yeah.
And I get that all the time. And shops frequently say that, I can't find the problem, therefore there's nothing wrong.
Well, I'm a little bit empathetic with that, but it's at the same time frustrating to me, right? So what's really happening is that you have a flat rate technician who's going, I can't duplicate the problem right away, so I'm moving on. I've done fast tests and I'm moving on. And I'm empathetic with that. That guy's trying to feed his family too. But we have a responsibility to our customers. Work a little harder, verify the problem. If you find the problem, take the time to diagnose it. Sometimes, it's not going to be a home run for the shop, but you have a responsibility to take care of your community.
Lyndon, we have music, which means we have done it one more time. How can
Shutting me down?
Yeah, shutting you down. How can we get in touch with you?
Phone number is 301-274-5000. It's brand new to me, Pat.
Yeah, I understand.
And website is allamericanharley.com.
allamericanharley.com.
Pretty sure that's right.
We hope.
Or just stop by and see us in Hughesville on Old Leonardtown Road. You go down Route 5 past Waldorf.
Oh,
and we're
what?
on the right. Old Leonardtown
Oh,
Road.
Leonardtown. I thought you said Glittertown. Yeah, okay.
That's going to be my new motorcycle.
All righty. Lyndon, thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
And thanks for listening, and thanks to Steve McMillan and George Stockton for producing today's show. For everyone here at Goss's Garage, I'm Pat Goss. Until next time, please, everybody, drive and ride gently. See ya.